Hi, everyone. This is Colin Drake. He was on this channel previously. I had interviewed him months ago on the topics of awakening. He has written many books on that topic. And today we are going to continue that conversation. Welcome back, Colin.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for reconnecting. I would love to continue our conversation on awakening. First, it's up to you, like how you want to begin this conversation. Should we first talk about your book? I know you have written a book on awakening and how different religion view awakening process. So would that be?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we can talk about that, but I'd actually like to talk about you first, if we can.
Sure.
Okay, because I'm interested in your whole spiritual background. So maybe we could start off with, were you born into a spiritual family?
No, I wasn't. I didn't know much about spirituality when I was growing up because I always felt like religion is all about traditions, like it's about different rituals. I didn't really know any meaning behind it, why it was done. It just seemed like a robotic process. And I never had an interest in that.
Right. So you didn't actually have a religious background. You didn't go to church, for instance, as a child, or?
I always had that in the background, like although no one really explained it to me. One of the first memories that I had, do you remember the first memory of your life?
I do.
I would love to know, like, what the very first memory when you were born. What was your first memory?
Well, the first thing I can remember, I had to go into hospital at the age of 2 to have an operation on my eyes, and that's the first clear memory I have because it was so strange and so. Well, it wasn't traumatic. It could have been traumatic, but anyway, it was just so unusual compared to the usual run-of-the-mill thing. So that's the first thing I remember when I was 2. How about you?
My very first memory was, I remember this clear message of like, I don't know if it was a voice or a thought, but a clear message of, don't believe in anything that is said here.
That's good. No, that's great, actually, because, yeah, I mean, one needs to investigate for oneself and discover for oneself. You know, if you believe in what people tell you, it can lead you down a difficult slope, you know.
And it's strange to me that my very first memory as an infant or as a child, now as a grown-up, it makes sense to me. Like what?
Yeah. I remember one of the first things I remember also is looking in the mirror and looking at my face and saying, "Who is that? That isn't me." I could not identify with the body mind. There was this face, but I knew it wasn't me. I remember that quite clearly, but when I was very young. So yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Another thing I remember was also I was shown this notion of all these words like good, bad, right, wrong, beautiful or ugly. They are just words. There is no meaning to it. That was another thing I remember. Those were some of the first things I remember. And another thing was when I first, the feeling wise, I remember like it felt like everything got like squished and contracted from light to kind of like dark, contracted feeling.
Yeah.
So that was my very first experience coming into this realm. But now it makes sense to me.
Yes, I can see, because when you first come into this realm, you don't have any false notion of identity or anything. You're just an expression of consciousness, really, and then it gets squished by conditioning and, you know, by the culture you live in and by everything that's just told to you by your parents. It just gets overloaded, and then that is a contraction. It's a definite contraction. So yeah. But
Yeah,
to have that memory is very useful because it later on it made you interested in the whole subject, you know. So.
yeah, that background was always there for me, and felt like now it makes sense where when you grow up and when you have have all these different experiences in this realm, like there was always this sense of like trying to fit yourself into something, some kind of like concept for others. That was a constant kind of struggle you have to kind of fit into their mold, what they want to perceive about you. So although that was happening, like I took spirituality as a serious thing. It kind of came into my way. I was interested in reading some of this stuff, and I wanted to do something on YouTube. So it was a spontaneous thing where I started. I spontaneously thought I'll do this as a hobby thing. And when I started talking to more and more people, it was kind of a happy accident.
Yeah, well, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful accident, actually. So your whole spiritual sort of education has come by talking to people.
Yes, like it was, and it was an inner voice that and an inner passion followed without having any bigger picture that this is what I didn't even know anything about enlightenment or self-realization. I just followed an excitement and a passion.
That's wonderful. That's great. So how long ago was that when you started this whole thing? When you got into it and it really, you know, how long ago was that?
It's been about 6 to 7 years now. I started this, and it has changed me significantly. I was not looking for a change, but it's a big milestone in a life, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's the major milestone in the life, really, I think, actually. And once it becomes a passion, then I mean, really, for to become awakened, there has to be a passion. It has to be, you know, it has to be a major intent and then passion for it to actually change your being. Otherwise, you're just a dilettante, a dabbler, you know. I mean, to be really into it, there has to be a passion, and that's wonderful. That's great. So, so you picked. That's right. So how many people have you interviewed now?
It's been about 100, I think, almost 100.
So you've been exposed to lots of different ideas and ways of looking at this whole subject.
Yes, I feel very grateful. I got to see all in so many different ways, and actually listen to some of these different pathways of unfolding.
Yeah, that's great. So how did you pick the people? How did you pick the people to interview to start with? I mean, when you first started out, how did you decide who you wanted to interview?
I know this may sound strange, but this whole thing that I did, it was not at all like thinking mind based. I do a lot of that in my work stuff where it's all logic reason. But this particular thing, what I do, I don't think that much, where I kind of like go to the like kind of falling back to that feeling that if I feel like reading a book and inquiring something, I like there has to be genuine interest. If I'm really interested in reading something about somebody's books, then I will further contact them and
I understand that. So but what started you out? How did you pick the first person?
The first person, it was Paul Selig. That was also like intuition based. There was something about him which felt like it was something. There was something that seemed like sincere to me, so I connected with him.
So you'd read some of his books?
I actually had like an offline conversation with him during those days. I don't know if he still does that, but during those days he would have like one-on-one conversations connect with people. I watched a lot of his content online. That was the first introduction.
Right.
I didn't read his book, but I watched a lot of his talks and videos and learned more about him. Then I had a personal conversation with him, and then
Okay.
and that's
All
how
right.
most of the work kind of unfolded, where I before connecting with people, I used to be interested in their work and look into what they have to say and try to connect with them.
Yeah, okay, that's fascinating. So does this led you down to, I mean, you obviously have you honed this down to one particular viewpoint that you follow? I mean, because obviously within the spiritual realm, there's thousands of different ways of approaching the absolute, you know. So has it honed you down to one particular way, or do you still, I mean, I've investigated lots of different ways, and I'm interested in them all, but I'm actually only interested in them where they resonate with my own discoveries, my own being, you know, where they resonate. I love the resonances. I always look for resonances, but I have one particular bent, shall we say, you know. So has that led you to one particular way of looking at things? Or?
I completely agree with you on the resonance things. That's how I kind of like followed my path, where I feel like the resonance may also change like over time. Like years ago, I resonated with something which I don't resonate with anymore.
I mean, the further on you go down the process, the more it does change, and you resonate with different things, you know, because you discover more yourself. So some of your old ways of looking at things, you wouldn't resonate with your old ways of looking at things either, you know. So
yeah, exactly. And now I feel like that has loosened up, where I don't try to hold on to something that I'm going to like this forever. It keeps changing over time. But there is more openness to like changing and realigning your own point of view. And I feel like self-realization kind of like loosens up that to a really great degree. You're identified with a certain
I agree with that. Because although I'm very one-pointed in my own particular spiritual practice, I do love reading and resonating with all the spiritual practices in the world where the resonances are there, you know. And all spiritual practices, as far as I can see, all spiritual paths have. I've often described it as a bit like sifting the sugar from the sand. You know, they all have sugar in them, and that's what I look for. I look for the sugar, and the sand. I just push it aside. I don't consider it or disagree with it or anything. I just push it to the side, looking for the sugar all the time. You know. So,
absolutely. And that's what my observation has been while talking to so different people, where even a very charismatic speaker can mix up their own personal opinions in their thoughts. So you have to be able to sift, as you said, sift the sugar off of the whole
from the sand. So does that led you to any kind of spiritual practice? Do you do any spiritual practice in the day? I mean,
before I was not into practice, but now I'm really drawn towards like recently I signed up to get a yoga teacher training. So that involves a lot of yoga practice. I'm not like interested in just like physical workout, but during this course, I want to figure out how to combine yoga for the real reason why it was created. Like now,
I mean, My wife's a yoga teacher. She did the whole yoga teacher training with the Satyananda organization here in Australia, which it was very rigorous actually, and she taught yoga for many years. And of course, the word yoga, you know, the word yoga means to unite with the. If you read the Oxford Dictionary definition of yoga, it's about a spiritual practice to unite with the absolute, because the word yoga means yoke. So within, you obviously know all this, but within yoga, of course, there's hatha yoga, which all Westerners, that's how they think of yoga. Hatha yoga, that's exercises, spiritual, physical exercises. And then there's Raja yoga, which is the yoga of meditation. They call it the royal path. There's Bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion. There's Gyan yoga, the yoga of knowledge. There's karma yoga, the yoga of working for other people, actually, disinterested, working without being attached to the results of your work. And then there's Kriya Yoga, which is Kriya Yoga is a yoga which is designed to raise the Kundalini. So there's lots of different types of yoga, but the word yoga actually embraces all of these in one umbrella. So
yeah, it's very fascinating how involved it is. And while I'm doing those practices, I'm seeing that even your body has the, like, for example, with self-realization, sometimes it can happen only at the mind level. But when you do this body level yoga, there are like untapped, like I'm not saying that everyone has to be like an athlete or something. Like depending on different body types, one can have their own way of tuning into that. Like, for example, there are parts of your body where there's not much of circulation happening. There are parts which are untouched, which need to be kind of like wake up because of yoga.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, I do a 15-minute practice every morning, which contains, have you heard of the Tibetan sevens?
I haven't.
Okay, so in Tibet, there's a series of 7 yogic exercises that form a regular morning routine. And it's believed that actually if you practice these every day, you'll virtually live forever, which is obviously just a myth. But they contain exercises which actually stimulate every part of the physical body. And then there's another. So basically, the exercises I do are based on Hatha yoga, but I also include some of the sevens. The main thing is to stimulate every part of your body during your morning practice, so that there's nothing left untouched. And so I designed my own practice probably about 35 years ago, and I've been doing it every day since then. But then I discovered the oh yes, this came from the sevens. The spin. Have you heard of the spin? It's like a Sufi whirl. So you stand at one point and spin 21 times in a clockwise direction. So I added that to my practice, and I love that. Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful way of starting your day, and it gets the whole body supple and feeling good. You know, it's great.
And on the mind version of yoga is where tapping into your subconscious, like things that you're not aware about, your own like programs that you, which are sometimes on autopilot, that comes to awareness. Same can happen on the body level where things.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. No, it is wonderful, actually. Yeah, so that's good. So does your practice include any formal meditation or anything like that every day?
Right now, I'm following the certification program, which will eventually get into like how to meditate and stuff, that part. So I'm kind of like going through a sequence of thing while I'm trying to get my certification. So it's in the, like, it will be something I will be getting into in like a couple of months. I'm really excited. Like I'm learning a lot. It's fun.
Yeah. It is interesting. I mean, I spent many years heavily involved in the whole yogic process, and now since certainly in the last 25 years since my awakening in 1996, I've actually kind of disassociated myself with a lot of that stuff, because there's a lot of that. Certainly a lot of the stuff Janet learned, my wife, in all the books, a lot of it is, how can I put it? I mean, a lot of it is dogma, actually. And there's a lot of dogma, a lot. And you don't need all that stuff to actually awaken. You need to actually rise out. It's a bit like you were saying when you were a baby, and when you felt everything was constricting down. And then when you wake up, you kind of break out of all that and you look at all that, and you can see its point and why it's there, how it can be useful, but you can also see it as a bit of a burden, actually, you know.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and that's why I wanted to see where, like right now I'm doing it because I love doing it. It's not like I feel like this has to be done and I have to get this certificate. It's more because I genuinely love it. But in that process, I want to see if it can be, if there is a new way of like looking at it, then how it's kind of become like a dogma right now. But if it doesn't, like, it's...
Yeah, I mean, you'll get a lot out of it without a doubt, and because you've done all these interviews in advance, actually, you've got all this. You've been exposed to a lot of very interesting and ideas, which will actually inform the way you look at the yoga that you're learning. You know, so that will help you rather than just picking it all up as a lump sum package. You know.
Yeah, otherwise, like I've seen like sometimes yoga teachers can be quite dogmatic in like this pose has to be in a certain way. And this is the spiritual principle and stuff like that. I know, like now I won't be buying into that. Like I'm more doing it like kind of like sifting sugar out of the sand.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, because I mean, obviously, there's a lot in it. I mean, it's got lots of wonderful things, and I still get a lot out of it every day because I do, as you know, I do my hatha yoga. I do yoga nidra at lunchtime, which we have discussed in the past. Did you ever try the yoga nidras I sent you?
I did. It was very relaxing that's another thing I wanted to share with you. Like there is a lot that happens in the dream state. I feel like dream state was also kind of something that helped in loosening up a lot of things, that a lot of stories. And yoga nidra, like although it's not related to dreams and stuff like that, but it has kind of like a similar that relax.
They call it psychic sleep, and it puts you into that level between falling asleep and being awake, where the mind is not asleep, but it's kind of exposed to, it's almost open to the subconscious in a way, you know. It puts you in that very deep. It is amazing, actually.
I do see some similarities between that and what happens in the dream state. Dream state was very helpful for me to see through some of the stories that I was falling into in my waking life. It's strange that all these things used to happen in dreams, but it would change me in my waking state.
No, that's interesting. I mean, I don't have that. My dreams, as I said to you before, they're pretty mundane. But that opening of the subconscious happened to me in a very dramatic way when I took acid back when I was 21. And it was such a strong experience. I basically overdosed, and I didn't know anything about it. I overdosed because I was given 2 tablets, and I did everything that was in my subconscious literally poured out. I mean, I felt like I was literally mad. But at the end of that process, it felt like I'd been completely cleansed. Like all the stuff that had been drummed into my subconscious since my childhood up until I was 21 just vanished, actually. It had no weight anymore, you know, because I'd seen it and it had just come out, you know. And so that for me was pretty cathartic. And so that's a similar process, but just a much more drastic way of doing it, you know, because dreaming is reasonably gentle compared to that.
Cleansing is it's a nice word that you use. That's what I feel like that cleansing can happen in dreams. And also it's gentle. It's not like too, although there can be nightmares, which can be quite dramatic. But it's kind of like a constant cleansing that can happen, which is, I didn't know that kind of is possible. I used to not, like before I was not that aware in my dream state. Now it's and in a way it's better because now I don't like attach any strong meaning to it or like get attached to. I identify it that this happened in dreams, so that's how it's meant to be. There's no like, it's just an observation, an interesting.
Yes. And of course you can carry that through to the waking state, so that everything that occurs in the waking state can be seen as not as a dream, but not of any great weight. You know, I mean, I like I like the idea that the absolute manifests for its pleasure and to reveal the hidden treasure. Now, when I say that, for its pleasure means actually, and this is a Hindu idea, as you probably know, that the manifestation is for the enjoyment of the divine, and to reveal the hidden treasure, that's so that the divine can know itself. So there's two reasons for that, for the manifestation. You getting this?
Yes.
So the idea that life should be enjoyable is to me is part and parcel of the function of being human, being a human being, and being a manifestation of the divine is for the joy of living, you know. And that's not to take anything too seriously, because we are just literally manifestations of that, and we're never separate from that, you know. So what's happening is it's not really a dream, but it's only relatively real, you know.
Yeah, in a way, it's better if some of these things open up after awakening, because those concepts don't have a lot of hold, a lot of weight on you. Like even if someone dreams something, there's no heavy weight attached to it. It's just like the living dream, where what you see is, as you mentioned, like it's a manifestation for
So are your dreams basically most of them lucid? I mean, are you aware that you're dreaming when you're dreaming?
No, I don't have lucid dreams. I have vivid dreams sometimes, but some of these dreams, like it's more, sometimes like there are different types of dreams where in some dreams it's more about like you see through like some of the obstructions that your mind creates, rather than seeing as they are. Like your mind is creating all these distortions, and there are dreams that can bring that to your awareness. But there are also some dreams that can tap into the unmanifested. It can tap into something that's beyond your imagination.
Okay.
So it's an
interesting. Yeah. Because I mean, my method of doing that is in my meditation contemplation, that I see more aspects of the unmanifest during that process. So mine is, and yours comes in while you're dreaming, which is equally valid, of course, because that unmanifest is always at the background of our being. And whichever way the mind finds of tapping into that is, it's equally valid. So that's good.
Yeah, and one thing I've noticed that it's very fascinating to me that some of these stories that these kind of like short stories that are presented in dream or a short scene, it's a very creative way to kind of like tailor to you personally, that only you meant for you, that you there's something that it has an essence that it's something that knows you so well, because no one else would know that many minor details about you, like some of the things that are not working out.
Like, that's interesting. It's fascinating. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it has helped me a lot in not just intellectual understanding, but kind of like because of these experiences that you have in dreams. Like for example, some of the things that happened in dreams now, I wouldn't be repeating those kind of traps in the waking state.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that's very good.
So I'm glad, like I wouldn't be doing those kind of mistakes in waking state, because I know if I'm bought into a certain concept, it shows like if you hold on to it rigidly and keep on going in that direction, what wall you are going to bump into.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I mean, once you can look at everything and not let it take it too seriously. Look at it from the point of view of just awareness itself, just as an experience that's happening to your mind body. Then you start to get a different view of it, a more sort of rounded view. You know, it doesn't. Yes, say it doesn't affect you in the same way that it would, and you can see it more clearly. You know, you can see things more objectively, actually, in that respect. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's not like I'm seeing something new in the waking state. It's not like that. It's just that those blockages or those filters are like removed.
Yeah.
Now you just
see because that's right. Because when you, I mean, most people are heavily identified as being a mind body, and when you're identified like that, you have all kinds of filters that you filter the whole of your experience through. I mean, identifying as the mind body is a major filter itself, you know, because you identify as a separate object in a universe of separate objects. So once you can go beyond that and identify in a more universal way, everything is seen completely differently, you know. So,
yeah, it's those are the distortions that happen. It's and like when people, like before, like 6 years ago, when people used to talk about in the new age stuff about being able to see aura and stuff like that, like I used to think that awakening means you would be able to see all these invisible things, but I think it's more about seeing these kind of like invisible patterns and stories.
Yeah. All those things about seeing auras and all that. I mean, I don't discount those. There are people that can do those type of things, but they're basically they're just like a sideshow. It's not important, actually. It's not important with regard to living from the awakened state. You know, they're just phenomena that come and go. Living from the awakened state means seeing the universe or the world without these personal filters, you know, without the things that cloud them.
Yeah, it's not like I discount that phenomena. What I meant was,
no, I understand. Yeah. No, I understand. You and I are on the same page on that. Yeah. I mean, in the yogic path, there's many different yogic powers that are possible to be assimilated as you pass through the various stages. But they're all not important, you know. Ramakrishna, I told you this story before about Ramakrishna, but Ramakrishna himself, he said that the basically psychic and spiritual powers that you accumulate on the path are actually a hindrance if you actually concentrate on those, you know, and use them a lot. They actually will stop you. So the main thing to do is just keep waking up, keep becoming freer and freer, you know.
Yeah, that spiritual ego can be can turn into.
That's right. I mean, because immediately that's a form of misidentification, actually, you know. So, yeah. It's interesting about Ramakrishna because I've followed him very heavily for about 15 years, and and I've been to Calcutta, I've been to Dakshineshwar Temple, I visited the main center there, the Ramakrishna Center, and I think the guy was amazing, but whereas you as a child when you were growing up in India didn't really know much about him at all, did you?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, to me the guy is just amazing, you know, the things that he discovered. It's incredible. Because, you know, you were talking earlier on about at the very beginning, you were talking about different religions, because I've written a book on different religions, and he basically not only followed, but he practiced them all until he discovered they reached the same point. I mean, he was the only person who experientially verified that Islam, Christianity, and the various paths of Hinduism all would lead to the same point. I mean, that's pretty amazing when you think about that.
That's very, very interesting.
It's staggering. I mean, because most people will pick up a spiritual path and it will take their whole life, and even maybe in one lifetime. And I don't necessarily believe in reincarnation, but as far as I can see, even then, even by the end of their life, they won't have reached the apex of that spiritual path. And that's true for most people. And to actually reach the apex of many of them in a very short time and discover they all have the same apex is just incredible. Yeah.
I find it fascinating that all these major religions, they are all trying to point to the same thing in different ways.
In very different ways, yeah, they are. And I mean, it is interesting. If you study them all, you find that they all say that we have to go past the limited ego. We have to go past that to discover the absolute. They all say that. They say it in different ways and for different reasons, but they all basically say that, yeah. And that's for me, that's the most important. That is actually the most important thing about waking up, is to go beyond the separate self and discover the universal. And the fact that all religions pointed out, if you look at them especially if you look at their mystical paths, which you have to actually, it's wonderful, actually. Wonderful.
Yeah, I feel like that is a major stepping point into the further exploration, because before that, the mind is constantly involved in a lot of different stories. I think that awakening is kind of like although like some people may see that as the final destination, I think that's actually kind of like the beginning. I
mean, I agree with you. Certainly, I mean, what you were saying about religion, as you thought of religion as a child, where you just thought it was just basically a set of stories and didn't really mean very much. And certainly, as a child, if you're inculcated into religion from the bottom, and then you have all this dogma piled on top of you, I mean, it's going to seem like that. It's obviously going to seem like that. And a lot of religions have actually they've pushed aside the mystical stream of that religion. The fundamentalist streams of most religions tend to downplay the mystical side, which is a great disservice to the religion itself, actually. Because the mystical side is the essence of the religion, really. Yeah.
I think a lot of these things get interpreted from the filter that person is seeing. Like, for example, the similar stuff happened with yoga, where now it's kind of diluted to physical exercises.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. It's interesting. I've often thought that human beings, a lot of human beings prefer to be given something to believe rather than to investigate for themselves, because it's easier, I mean, I call it intellectual laziness myself, because it's easier just to believe something rather than to actually figure it out for yourself, But if you rely on belief, which is often designated as faith, but it's faith or belief, then you're always on shaky ground, because there's always doubt can always come in and actually displace the belief, or to invalidate the belief. And then where are you left when your belief has been destroyed by doubt, So, but if you discovered for yourself, by your own investigations, and especially if the investigation that you carry out can be repeated on a regular basis and come to exactly the same conclusion, then you know that then for yourself. You discovered it for yourself. There's no doubt can never get in there, because if there's any doubt, you just redo the investigation and you realize it reveals the same result, So, yeah.
I would love to hear your analysis on all these, or your observation about all these different religions. What have you noticed?
Well, as I just said to you, they all actually have they all have a mystical path that when analysed, basically comes down to the fact that everything comes from the divine, and everything returns to the divine, and that we are essence. We are essentially instruments of the divine. They all, in the mystical paths, you'll find that in all of them, but they just couch it in very different language. So it can be quite, excuse me, can be quite difficult to actually see how they're saying that the same thing. So it does require quite a lot of study. That's what I say. That's what I say about sifting the sugar from the sand. You know. So I mean, for instance, if you read books about Sufism and by Sufis, you will find that what I've just said, that they have this idea that everything comes from Allah, the divine, and everything returns to that, and everything is maintained by that, and we are actually instruments of that. You'll find all of those things within there, but you'll find lots of other stuff in there which is actually less important. It's just the sand. You've got to look for the sugar. It's the same in the Bible. I mean, the Jews themselves, in general, certainly in America, certainly in general, they don't believe in an afterlife. Actually, they believe that we human beings are made from dust. From dust we come, and to dust we go. But while we're alive, we're infused by the breath of God, which means that we actually are infused with the divine essence, and that comes from God and infuses the physical body, which is made from elements from dust, and then when we die, that returns to God. Now, that actually, when you look at that, that's exactly what I just said to you. Basically, we're full of divine essence. We come from the divine. We're full of divine essence while we're here, and they believe that we should follow God's commandments. We should be instruments of God. They also believe that we are capable of creating in the world. They say that God created created the world in 6 days, and at the end of the 6 days he rested. Now, the mystical interpretation of that is he rested, leaving the universe unfinished and leaving man as his image to finish the creation. So we are creators, but within his will. You with me? So, sorry, I've got a bit of fog here. I'll just have a drink. So this is and we're basically just talking about Judaism here, which is a lot of people regard as being a fairly almost archaic religion now, but that has that stream in it. Christianity has the stream where Christians believe that, as you know, we have a soul, which is a different stream of Christianity. You have to look at that differently, but they basically believe that we're made to for God's glory and to rejoice in God's creation. And if you look at the way that the afterlife is a bit confusing in Christianity, because lots of denominations have different ideas about that. But certainly, if you go to the negative mystics, have you ever read any negative Christian mystical literature?
I haven't. I'm curious about it.
Yeah. Well, if you if you start off with Dionysius the Areophagite, he was I think it was about the 4th or 5th century. He was a mystic, and he wrote a lot of mystical literature, and he talks about union with the divine a lot in his literature, and from that has developed a great stream of negative Christian mysticism that's infused Christianity. It's not so common these days, but certainly in the Middle Ages and probably up until about Descartes or until the Age of Enlightenment, when man became more reasonable and materialistic, it was a very strong part of Christianity. And when I say negative mysticism, what they mean by negative is that You don't assign anything that's positive. You kind of strip away everything you could be said about the divine until there's nothing more you can say, and then you reach the absolute, because the absolute is actually beyond. It contains the relative, it contains the manifestation, but it's beyond that also. And none of the manifestation or the relative is critical to the absolute itself. They just come and go within that. So if you the negative way is to strip away all of anything that can be said about the divine. There's a stream of that in Hinduism called neti neti. Have you heard of neti neti?
Yeah.
Yeah, yes. And neti literally means not this, not that, not this, not that. And so, and when you're looking for the absolute itself, you continually discard everything, not this, not that. Everything in the relative world is discarded to reveal the absolute. Well, that's exactly the same. That's negative mysticism. Yeah, yeah. And there's a very strong stream of that in Christianity. And some of the writings of the Christian mystics of the 13th and 14th century are just exquisite, actually. Yeah. You've heard of Meister Eckhart? Have you heard of Meister Eckhart?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. Okay. So he was a lot of his sermons are full of this negative mysticism. Of course, they were all persecuted by the authorities because their pronouncements didn't tally completely with the dogmatic fundamentalist, doctrines of the church. But even then, that's probably more to be said in favor of them rather than the other way around, actually. So anyway, but that's a great source of which can be mined looking for sugar. It's full of sugar, negative mysticism in Christianity. Excuse me. I'm just trying to think. There's a guy I'm reading at the moment, John de Rysbroek is his name. He was a 13th century Flemish mystic, and a lot of his writings they're just exquisite. So when I say sift the sugar from the sand, well, with him you've probably got about 50 or 60% sugar, which is pretty good. If you read the Bible, there's sugar in there, but it's a lot less than 60%. Anyway, that's just my opinion, But so there's Christian mysticism, negative Christian mysticism is a very rich source. Sufism, of course, is, as I say. But talking about the way the authorities have decried mystics, there was a famous Sufi mystic. His name was Hallaj. I think that was the 13th century too. It seems like the 13th and 14th century were very rich for mystical awakening, actually. But he spent some time in India, and when he went back to Persia, which was, of course, pretty fundamental Sunni Muslim, he at some stage made the statement, I am the truth, I am God. Now, he didn't just mean in a personal way, he meant that we're all God. God is, everything is an expression of the divine. And for that, he was actually executed, just for saying that one thing, in a very gruesome way, in fact. So that's because in Muslim, in Islam, they say Allah has no partners. Have you heard that? Allah has no partners.
Yeah, I think I've heard that.
Yeah, and what that basically means is basically you cannot assign a name, an image, any kind of image, any kind of relative reality. You can't assign that as being Allah. Allah has no partners. I mean, they regard Jesus as being an amazing prophet, but they don't regard him as being the Son of God because Allah has no partners.
Do you mind repeating the name of this person who was prosecuted? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Hallaj, Hallaj, Hallaj. If you put that into Google, you'll find lots about him. Actually, yeah. I mean, I was just reading it yesterday. His final utterance. And I can't give it exactly, but his final utterance when he was about to die under execution was something amazing about the unique way of approaching the absolute. I mean, he was so steeped in that even being executed did not take his mind away from the absolute reality. I mean, it's just incredible, actually. Yeah. So that's Sufism. Oh yeah, another one. There was another Sufi mystic who said that his name was Jilli, Jilli. He said that everything in reality is like an ocean of consciousness, and the actual physical manifestations are just like blocks of ice in the ocean. They're not separate from the ocean. They've just appeared out of the ocean. They will melt back into the ocean. And he said, although most people think they were different, we mystics know they are the same. So he was actually saying that there is only one ocean of consciousness, of which everything is just a manifestation. And certainly, yeah, so that was Jilli. So there's a lot of that in Sufism, actually. Yeah. So we've done Christianity, Sufism, and Judaism. Yeah. In Judaism, the mystical side of that is the Kabbalah. If you read the Kabbalah, because they say that everything comes from the infinite nothingness, the Ein Sof, and eventually everything returns there. And our human existence is it's a path for perfecting ourselves until we realize that, and then we return to the Ein Sof. So that's, I mean, that's they're all basically saying the same thing. We come to the divine, we live within the divine, and we return to the divine. You know, which is pretty amazing. So Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, of course. Well, you know, in Advaita Vedanta, I mean, that's exactly what I've just said. We all come from Brahman. We're manifestations of Brahman. We're never separate from Brahman, and we return to Brahman. That's Advaita Vedanta. There's a lot of dualistic paths in Hinduism too, but that's that Advaita Vedanta. And the other one is I've just been reading about this. I knew nothing about this. I just ran into it the other day, and I started reading about it. I thought, my God, have you heard of Kashmiri Shaivism?
Yes, I have heard of it. There is a yoga version even of Kashmir Shaivism. They have their own. They have their own version of yoga, Kashmir Shaivism.
Yes, but that's yeah. So if you study that, you'll find that actually is also has exactly the same idea, that we come from the divine, we're expressions of the divine, and we return to the divine. You know, so that's yeah. So within Hinduism, there's lots of various paths that say this as well. The only one that is more difficult to find it within is in Buddhism, because, as you know, the Buddha wouldn't talk about the absolute. He would never discuss it. As far as he was concerned, the discussion of the absolute was a waste of time. It was more important to find a way of, as you know, the Buddha developed the four noble truths and the eightfold path, and his whole aim was to reduce suffering in the world, and he developed a method to do that without actually having to have any belief in the divine, the divine at all. It was. That's not to say he didn't believe in the absolute. It's just that he wouldn't answer questions of that. He said they were by arrows, and instead of pulling the arrows out, you actually start saying, well, now I wonder who made this arrow, who fired this arrow, where did this arrow come from? He said that the most important thing is to pull the arrows out. The most important thing with suffering is to overcome it, not to indulge in metaphysical speculation. So in Theravadan Buddhism, it's actually difficult to find any information about the divine. But if you go to Mahayana Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism and Zen Buddhism, then there's Tibetan Buddhism believes in an absolute realm of pure, radiant, pristine awareness called Rigpa. And in Zen Buddhism, that's Zen mind, which is universal mind. So they both have this idea. And in Zen Buddhism and Mahayana and Tibetan Buddhism, you'll find this whole idea that we come from the divine and we return to that. Yeah. So it's actually endemic in all of the world's major religions. Plus, in Native American spirituality, for instance, they have the same ideas. Everything is a manifestation of the divine, and we're just on earth to enjoy it, and look after it. You know, we are also manifestations of that, the Great Spirit. So yeah, so you'll find it in all the spiritual paths of the world, actually, if you look carefully.
So we see this common theme of creation and awakening in all these different religions. Do we also see similar commonalities when it comes to afterlife? What do they have?
No, they well, yeah, the afterlife's interesting. I mean, of course, we can know nothing. We can actually know nothing about the afterlife. Everything is just theory in this respect. I mean, if you've discovered that basically you are actually just a manifestation of consciousness itself, and you can actually discover this with self-inquiry. Then, as that, if we come from consciousness and we're manifestations of that, then it's logical that we should return to that when the mind body dies. That's the logical outcome of, because we are just consciousness. There is nothing else. But what happens after you die between then and when you finally return to the ultimate consciousness and just become one with that? Each different religions say lots of different things about what happens in that process. You know, there were different stages, and they all have different ideas about that. And of course, the dualistic religions, the dualistic streams within religions don't believe that we ever return to the divine. They believe that we stay separate as eternal, separate beings forever. Yeah. So, and a lot of religions are dualistic. I mean, Catholicism is dualistic. They believe that we're separate souls and will remain separate forever. You'll find that stream in Sunni and Shiite Islam too, that we basically are separate souls that remain separate. You'll find it in lots, any religion that's dualistic. Vaishnavism in Hinduism, that has the same idea. So I mean, basically there's two different, there's non-duality and duality. Well, in duality, if you're a follower of duality, then you're bound to believe that when you die you stay separate, because that's what you are. You're a separate entity. Whereas in non-duality, then there is only the one. So you can do nothing but return to the one eventually. You know. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Emmanuel. Have you ever heard of Emmanuel? He's a channeled spirit. Have you heard of? You must have run into people who talk about channeled spirits.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, there's a channel spirit called Emmanuel who Ramdas thought very highly of, and he interviewed the woman who channels Emmanuel, and they wrote a book together. And it's called Emmanuel's Book. It's very beautiful, actually. It's gorgeous. Anyway, but he talks about, people ask him what happens after you die, and he says, well, basically, you're a creative being while you're alive, and when you die, why should that be any different? You basically create your own reality about what happens after you die. But this is only a temporary phase. So, for instance, if you believe, say you're a materialist and believes in nothing, that when you die, there'll be nothing there. Well, that's actually what you will experience initially when you die. You're just a complete blackness, complete void. Whereas if you believe in that you're a separate individual being, then there are lots of different realms that you can enter with that kind of belief, depending on how your belief is based. I mean, you have the bardos in Tibetan Buddhism. You know, you've heard of the bardos. They're the various stages between death and rebirth. You heard about those?
Do you mean bardo?
Bardos, yeah.
Yeah, I have heard.
Yeah, okay. So they have various stages that they say you go through between dying and being reborn. So if you're a Tibetan Buddhist and you believe in the bardos, then you might well encounter those, because that's your belief system when you die. You know, of course they do have the the first Bada you encounter actually is the radiant aware nothingness I was talking about earlier on, that they believe in Rigpa. And if you recognize that, then you're not reborn. You just merge into that. That's their way of looking at it. Yeah, but my point is that A, we can't know what happens after we die, and B, every religion has a different, and streams of religion have different ideas about what happens after we die. And the main thing is about living now in the present moment and not even worrying about what happens after we die, of course, because we can only live now in the present moment. And what happens after we die is totally irrelevant to living in the now. Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting what happens after you die, but I don't, to me, it's of no weight. It doesn't carry any importance. The importance is living now, awake.
Yeah, it's fun to look at all these insights onto creation, awakening, and afterlife from all these different traditions. It's a very
it is. It's interesting, but you know,
I would love to hear about like you have written some poems on awakening.
I've written hundreds of them. The question is, yeah, you see, when I wrote my first book, Beyond the Separate Self, shortly after that, I wrote a poem to one person who was having a lot of trouble with the whole idea. And I had a lot of discussions with this gentleman, and he basically was such a skeptic that anything I said didn't get through to him at all. And he wouldn't even look for himself, basically. He was just had this skeptical wall. So I wrote this poem, and he appreciated the poem, but it still didn't get through. But when I put the poem up to my email group, I got lots of amazing responses. And I got better responses to that poem than I got to anything else I'd ever written. So I thought, well, maybe there's something in this, you know. So I was talking to a poet friend of mine, and he said, well, he thought that poetry had the possibility of being more powerful than prose, in that because you have to say things in such a short way in poems. You can't. My poems are generally about 250 words long, whereas my articles are about 1,000 words long. So it's only a quarter of the amount of words, but I'm still saying the same amount, saying the same thing. So basically, it's more succinct, it's easier to read, but it also requires the reader to actually read the meaning into the poem. They actually have to investigate for themselves. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I was thinking about that. I thought, yeah, that's interesting, because I'm always exhorting people to investigate for themselves. So I thought, well, maybe I'll start writing poems. So I took each chapter of the book and turned it into a poem, and then the book became also a book of poems. So I've got the book of prose and the book of poems, and each goes with the other, you know. So I started doing that, and then I've basically been doing that ever since. So every time I write a book, every time a book comes out, I then turn it into a book of poems. So I've got about 300 poems now. And then in between times, during my meditation and contemplation, sometimes things would come up that would just become a poem. Things would come up in my mind, and I start to see new things, and poems would just come. So I've got some of those as well. So I've got quite a large range, you know. So.
Are there a couple you would like to read today, or?
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll just read the one that I was talking about. The first one I wrote, Proof. I just put that up on just let me find. I just put it up on Facebook the other day, because I have a Facebook page where I put up a poem every couple of days. I put up a poem, and I just got to find it now. You think I should be able to repeat these off the top of my head, but I've written so many of them now. That's yeah, okay. Yes, so this poem was called "You Ask for Proof," okay, because he wouldn't even investigate for himself. He basically wanted proof of what I was saying, and I as far as I'm concerned, you can't actually give proof. It requires you to anyway. So I wrote what I wrote. You ask for proof. What more proof could there be that that which lives and breathes in me also lives and breathes in thee? The lover and beloved are ever within and without. Of this amazing mystery there can be no doubt. She feels every sensation that our bodies feel. As we eat, she partakes of every meal. That which we see and hear is also heard and seen by the beloved. Sorry. That which we hear and see is also heard and seen by the beloved, thee. All that we taste and smell is sensed through us by thee as well. There's no thought or mental image that has been without appearing on the conscious screen, whereon by the mind they may be seen, glowing in the lover's radiant sheen. In this there can be no separate saying. Manifestation is the lover and beloved playing. What appears to us as you and me are expressions and instruments of the beloved, thee. Between awareness and creation, there can be no separation, for the lover and beloved are already one, appearing as the many just for fun. Locked in an eternal embrace in which no parting can ever take place. Consciousness encompassing time and space, always in a state of grace. Yeah, so that's that one. So and the thing about the poems, actually, I don't like the reflection on my glasses. So I've got, when I do my meditation and contemplation now, which I do 2 or 3 times a day, I read one poem every day, before each every one. So by the time, say 2 a day, yeah. So every 6 months, in every 6 months, I basically read through everything I've discovered over the last 25 years in poem form. So for me, they're a great reminder, just yeah.
That was a beautiful poem. Thank you for reading that. And
yeah,
what I think about.
Sorry, if anybody wants to see more of them, all they've got to do is get a look at my Facebook page, Colin Drake, and they could become a friend or just look at the pages as and when they like. I put up poems every other day, and I also put up lots of photographs because I live in an amazing space, so I'm always putting up photographs of. We see the sunrise out of the ocean here, so I put up some photographs of the sunrise out of the Pacific Ocean, and I live in rainforest, so it gets lots of beautiful views up here in the rainforest. I put those up too. So yeah.
I'll link to your Facebook page in the.
Yeah.
You didn't have that before, right? Is it something new?
Oh no, I've had the Facebook page now for over 10 years, I'd say. Yeah. I have 3 pages. I have one which is just my page, Colin Drake, and then I have another one which is about all my books. And it's called Beyond Awakening Publications, and I have a third one which is Tom will win pottery, because we're potters. So I've got a whole page devoted to our pottery as well. So, but if you go onto my first page, Colin Drake, you'll see all the other pages are available from that page. Yeah.
And if you ever want to reconnect and read more poems, I would happy to do that. Like I think I do see how poems can be more effective than just talking, or just regular writing, because sometimes those things can be kind of like rigid concepts.
Yes, yeah. I mean, yes. One of the wonderful things about writing poems actually is because I know a lot of people don't rhyme poems, but I like to rhyme poems. I'm old-fashioned in that respect. And the rhyming process forces you to look at new ways of saying things because you are trying to rhyme them, And within that process, often you will discover things you didn't discover before. When you wrote the original article and then you turn it into a poem, you'll discover new things you didn't discover before because you're trying to find different ways of saying it. So that's interesting too. And I mean, the other thing I could just read out a poem and then talk about the poem so that if people don't understand it. But I do prefer people to look for themselves and try and figure it out for themselves. I mean, that's part of the process,
Thank you, Colin. This was a really we captured so much in this conversation, and it was fun. So thank you for
it was good. It's good. Yeah, it's good to hear about you and your background. I enjoyed that.
And I want to thank audience also for if you find this kind of content useful or informative, please remember to leave your feedback in the comments and subscribe. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. I will.